All right, so we are going to make one more wall lamp, and this time we're going to build it out of NURBS surfaces. So let me go ahead and get the reference up here so we can see what we're going to do. So I'm just in my front view. I'm going to go and import my image plane. And you can see I've got my modeling tutorials and it's in my source images right there. And this is the one that we're going to build today. So I'll go ahead and just throw that in there. And let me go ahead and fill that with the front view. So the first thing that we're going to do, okay, let me just talk through really quick how this is going to work, right? So we're going to make a sphere for the globe. That's pretty obvious. And then we're actually going to take another sphere and cut it in half and then cut it apart and attach it so that we make this base. And then we're going to do another very similar thing to make this wall mount out here. And then we'll probably just make some little spheres to do our little screws. And then we'll do a NURBS extrusion for our stem. So let's go ahead and I'm just going to make sure that I'm in the curves and surfaces tab if you want to use these. Or if you come up to create, make sure you're grabbing stuff out of the NURBS primitives menu. So I'm going to make a sphere and just going to move it up here and match it up with our reference. And again, whenever you're moving stuff like that in the front view, you want to make sure that you're grabbing from that middle cube so that it's growing in all directions instead of something like this where it's stretching. So we've got that pretty much well placed, I think. So, and that's going to be our globe. So I'm going to duplicate that really quick because we're going to use another spheres to start building our base right here. And then this one, I'm just going to hide it for a minute. So Control H is what hides it. Control Shift H is what brings it back. So let me go through that again. Control H will hide an object. Control Shift H will bring that object back. Now, if that doesn't work, if you hide something and then you do Control Shift H and it does not come back, what you can do is look in the outliner and whatever it is that's hidden will be in a little bit darker gray like that. So then you just select it, come over here where it says visibility, type the word on, and it'll come back to you. So that's just another little tip about using the outliner. So let's get back to our base here. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to cut this in half and we're going to get rid of the top. And then we're going to make a couple of different layers of this half. And then we're going to cut out the middles and attach it together to make this little thing here. So I'm going to go to isoparms on this. I'm going to select this center isoparm. And I'm going to come up here where it says surfaces, detach. And now that obviously cuts that into two. And we don't need this one anymore. So I'm just going to get rid of it. So then let's start adjusting the shape of our half sphere. So I'm going to go to Control Vertices. And what we want to do is to just flatten this out. Because if you look up here, it's actually just pretty flat with just some curves on the side. And so kind of an easy way to do that is to just, with these rows of vertices, I'm going to select all of these and just pull them up so that they're even with the ones right above them. And then I'm going to do the same thing again. Pull these up so that they're even with that. And that's very similar curve to what we're looking at up here. So, I mean, if you want to maybe not make it quite so tight, you could do that. That's probably good too. But that's what we're going to do there. So, now then, we need to come in from the top, or from the bottom actually. And I think that's probably good. Let's go ahead now and duplicate this. I'll go back to the front view to do that. So we're going to duplicate, that's Control D. I'm going to lift this up so that it's about even, just like that. We want this line right here, if you can see that line. I'll go to isoparms and select it. that line right there needs to be even with the top of this. So I'll go back to object mode and just move that to where it's right there. And then if we come over here and look at it from the bottom, we want to try and make sure that this isoparm, which is the same one, is even with the outside edge of this. So, and it's going to be a little bit tricky. We'll have to move it up and down and kind of eyeball it. But if we scale out to there, roughly, and then we'll lift it up and see where we are. Maybe we'll scale it out a tiny bit more. Something about like that. Maybe that's a little bit too big. There we go. And then that's probably a good place for it too. So now we're going to come in the inside here. And then select that isoparm again. Just make sure that it's selected in isoparm mode. And then I'm going to detach that. Go to surfaces, detach. And then this center thing I'm just going to cut out. So we have the whole thing is hollow on the inside. And now we just need to attach this right here. So I'm going to go ahead and go to isoparm on both of these, because we're going to select these two edges and then we're going to attach them with the attach command. So, and I find it, because I want the very, very edge of this selected, right? And sometimes if you just click it, you might get just a little bit off of that edge. So what I have found is if I go back to this isoparm and then I drag it, see here there's that middle line that happens, drag it all the way to the edge of the surface, then you know for sure the very edge is selected. And then same thing the other way down, hold down shift, drag that isoparm all the way down to the very edge. And the other thing that does is it takes these two surfaces and sort of aims them at each other, and that just makes it attach easier. So then I'll go surfaces, and I'm going to look in the attach menu and let's see what we see. So there's a few different things that we can do. We can just blend it and we'll see what that looks like. And that actually makes it too soft and too kind of like, because it just blends out everything. And we want a little bit harder corner right there, right? So I'm going to undo, and then I'm going to turn on connect and see what that looks like. And that's not really good either. I don't like that either. So if I turn it back to blend, but I turn this insert knot on, that will put another little isoparm in there, and it'll still have a little bit of a curve, but it'll be a harder corner. So this is more like what we want. The other thing is you want to make sure to turn off this keep originals, because let me show you what will happen if we have this on. We will have our new surface, but those other surfaces will still be there, and they'll be like, you know, you're trying to select one thing and you don't know what you have, and it gets messy because you have like double. See there, I've got just the bottom selected, so it's just messy if you do it that way. So my suggestion always is to keep this turned off, unless there's a specific reason why you would need to keep the originals and the new attached piece. So turn that off, make sure insert knot is on and blend is on, and attach them. All right, and that is going to be our base. So let me go ahead and we'll just resize it a little. Now if I try to move this, you can see how it kind of stretches all crazy. And that is because we have not deleted the history. So when you attach two NURBS surfaces like this, Maya remembers the position of each individual one, and it will try to preserve that position. So, but if we come up here and delete our history, then we can move it around just fine. So then we'll come up here and we'll scale it down quite a bit. All right, it's probably about right. And then we want to make sure that our globe is sitting right in there. So maybe we scale that up just a little bit as well, just so it's kind of intersecting. That's good. Now then, to do this other side, we're just going to do the same thing, except we're going to do 3 layers. So I'm going to go ahead and take my globe. Before I go anywhere, I'm just going to rename this base. And then I'll duplicate my globe again. And then take my original globe and hide it again. And then I will just do the same thing I just did, except I'm going to do it 3 times. So select this middle isoparm and detach it. Get rid of this top. Go to Control Vertex and move these points upward. And move these points up around there. Right, so then I'll duplicate this. And then I'll do another duplicate so we can give all 3 of our layers. And now I'll go ahead and just resize this how we need to and reposition it. Just like before. It's probably good. Let me look at it from this side. It's probably good enough. And then, and again, I'm just doing exactly what we did before. I'm just scaling these up so that that isoparm on the inside will line up with the outside edge. Right. So now we can come in here and let me go ahead and get rid of this so we don't have to see it. I'm going to come in and select my image plane and go into the attribute editor, and I'm going to turn on looking through the camera, and then we'll only be able to see it through the camera that we put it on, which is this front view. So now, see, now we got space. So I'm going to go to isoparm and select this isoparm. Oh, it's tricky. There we go. And then detach, surfaces detach. I'll delete the middle, and then on this one I'll do the same thing on that line. Surfaces detach. And now I have all of my inside sort of like cut out and everything's ready to get put together. I have to delete that still. There we go. Alright, so we'll go to isoparm on each one of these. Click and drag this to here, and then shift click and drag this down here. So, oh, did I unselect? I'll try it one more time. There we go. Go up to surfaces, attach. Make sure that I have blend and insert not on and keep originals off. And I'll attach that. Now it has gone inside out, but that's okay because we can just fix that later. But we'll just go ahead and do the same thing again with this edge. Come back up to surfaces, and we know that our options are set up correctly, so we can just go attach. And there it's actually just fixed itself for us. So this is going to be our wall mount. So let's go ahead and delete the history on that. And then we'll name it mount. If we could spell it right. There we go. And now we can go back and go to the front view. And then I will go ahead and rotate it 90 degrees on the z-axis, negative 90 degrees. And then this, we kind of are looking at this at an angle in the reference. So you just kind of have to eyeball how far back you think this is, and then scale down the size. And what might be easier is to figure out the size first. If you just kind of go to the middle of this and then scale it so that it matches, kinda. See how that's mostly that height, maybe a little bit shorter. There we go. We might need to scale this down a little just to flatten it out. And then just use your own judgment about how far back this should go. I'm thinking probably about here. Right. So now we do need to do one more thing to this before we can do our stem, and then we'll make our little screw details. So we need to add another little hole right here. So what we'll need to do is add an isoparm that's small enough that our hole can be there, and then we'll use that to draw our curve and do our extrusion. So I'm going to go to isoparm, and then I'm going to grab this isoparm and drag it down to maybe about that size. However big you want that stem to be, that's probably good. Then I'm going to go up to surfaces and go to insert isoparm, and that will put that isoparm in there. And now we want to take that isoparm and we want to detach so we can cut that little hole out. So now we can delete that, and now we have this little hole. So that is our mount, and we've done some more work on it, so now we have to rename it. So we'll just call it mount again. There we go. And now we've got these two pieces and then our globe, which I'll go ahead and turn back on. And now we just need our stem and our little screw things. So we'll go back to the front view, and we'll get out our CV curve tool. And we'll start over here kind of in the middle, and then maybe go out a couple and start drawing what you feel like. I mean, you can't trace it exactly probably, but just eyeball what you want this stem to look like. And actually, if you wanted to do something a little different, that would probably be okay too. But I've got that in, and then let's see what we can do if we need to do any kind of adjusting. That probably needs to be a little bit straighter. Coming down out of there, it's probably good. And then just adjust this however you feel like it should look. That's probably fine. All right, so we'll go back over here, and we're going to do our NURBS extrusion. So we will go to isoparm on here and select that isoparm, and then we'll shift select this curve. And this is very similar to the other stem, where you have to have this part selected in component mode and then the path curve selected in object mode. Then I'll come up here to surfaces, extrude, and we'll just see what this looks like first, because we might need to adjust the settings, but let's just see what it does. And that's actually pretty close to perfect. So sometimes it will go sort of off in a different direction, and you got to go into the option box and change some things, but I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. I think what I could do is just take this last row of vertices and move it up in there so that it intersects and it looks all nice and clean. But we're good on that. So now I can delete the history on that, and I'll call it stem. And now the last thing to do is our two little screw details, and we'll just use another sphere. I'll duplicate this. I'm going to rotate it so that it's 90 degrees on the Z-axis, and then obviously it has to be quite a lot smaller, so we'll shrink it way down. And you can even look in the side view Maybe we'll put this to wireframe so we can see. And then we can sort of just decide how small we want this. If I line it up with that center line on our wall mount, scale it down to like maybe like that. That's probably a good screw size. I'm going to call this screw 1. And then I'll duplicate it. And we've got the other one sort of lined up on the other side in the same place. And then I'll select both of them and we'll look at it in the perspective view. And let's zoom in on these a little bit. Well, not that way. We'll scale them down so that they look flat. However flat you feel like, that's probably good. And then move these forward. And actually they're kind of not really in the right place. So then we can come back here and then just adjust. Like maybe we line it up on this line. So what I'm doing is just trying to line up the center of this where those two curves cross. Just like that. And then we can push these forward. We have our little screws there. And you can keep playing with this if you want. If you want them to be closer, you can do that. If you want them to stick out more, you can push them more forward. But that is what we have. Let me make sure and delete all the history on everything. If you come up to Edit, Delete All by Type History, then you can select all of your objects. You can go to Modify, Freeze Transforms. And then what I might do is actually group everything together as well and call it Wall Lamp. And then another thing that you can do to just make this easier to work with, like if you were going to build something like this and put it in a room, come over here to the front and I'm going to hit D so that I can move my pivot point, and I would move it right down here in the middle of this wall mount. And that way, if you know you needed to place this on a wall or something, you could just select that group and you could just move it right where it needs to go. Or if you wanted to rotate it, it would rotate in the right place and it would just be easier to work with. So that is the NURBS surface wall lamp. Make sure that you save your scene into your scenes folder and that you then post it up to Canvas as well. Thanks very much.